What were the 1990s like? I was 10 in 1990. I remember when the 80s were over. And it felt like, oh, here we go into the future. I remember thinking that the look of people and movies and cars was so perfect and clean. Like, how could it ever get any better than this? Discovered Nirvana around 1992 after some kid left a Ziploc bag of cassettes in the little gas station my parents owned. By 1993 I was doing my best to ride a skateboard, listening to Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, 9 Inch Nails, Nirvana, salivating over every new grunge release. The next year, I listened to Green Day's Tiki on my Sony Walkman while skating around town, non-stop. That album was new and fresh and amazing. How could music be this good? Seinfeld was hilarious and the best of what TV could be. Invited friends over to spend the night, and we would go to Blockbuster and rent movies, always hoping the newest, best movies were still available. Many times they were not, even though there were literally walls of the same title. Rent video games for the NES or Sega Genesis. Stay up literally all night playing them. Sitting on the bedroom floor mashing controller buttons. Forgetting we had legs and feet. Trying to stand up after hours, and they turned into static Y pins and needles with no supporting ability. Watched dumb horror movies like Leprechaun and its many ridiculous sequels. Lawnmower Blade Tits. Anyone. Talked on the phone literally all night with friends. Multiply 69 to find out who called. 3-way calls. Call waiting was the bomb. Internet showed up mid-decade. Web crawler. Those 3 spiders on a grey screen. But now I could search for anything. This internet thing is amazing. Email by 1997. Then practicing the act and sat on a computer, filling out forms for college. Actually researching schools without going anywhere. Getting anxious for computer graphics to get better. We all knew they were going to. It felt hopeful. The 2000s were coming. What would that bring? The 1990s already felt like such a futuristic time. People say it a lot, but it is true. Things got so real once 9/11 happened. Got us feeling reality down to the bone. The superficiality and ease of life in the 90s was gone. Everything sort of mattered more, or less. But things were not the same. Edit. I'm literally sorry for the number of times I used the word literally in this post. 9/11 was a really traumatic demarcation. Pre-9/11 society and post-9/11 society were so different. It is difficult to describe the atmosphere to people born post 9/11 seems very anxious, depressed, and mopey. If you did not know something, sometimes you just never knew. Like if you forgot the name of a song, you could not find out the name in 2 seconds. It might be a year until you figured it out. I called my fav radio station a couple times to ask the DJ the name of a song back in the mid-90s. I remember hearing Psycho Killer for the first time, maybe 97. I turned on the radio and the song was halfway through. I was completely wrapped. The DJ did not say what the song was, and I called and was so grateful when he told me. I will never forget that call. Old man here. Born in the 1960s. I agree with the statement about living pre-extremism. But the biggest thing I have noticed through the years it is how things change so much faster as time goes on. Not just technology, everything. I was born in 82, so I'm of that unique generation that had most of their teens being fairly traditional. Then the very late teens being when mobile phones gained mass adoption. It is absolutely insane how the way we socially interact completely changed in just a couple of years. For the most part, my formative years were really not that different from my parents. Then all of a sudden we seem to be living in a different era. 83 year here. Spot on. I remember being maybe 11 or 12 when we got our dial-up connection and all of those AOL CDS, AIM and the other early chat programs changed absolutely everything. You went from only being able to interact with the other kids in your neighborhood or school to ASL line with somebody from the other side of the planet. Like, overnight. Edit. In hindsight, it really makes me think about how that exact period in time started humanity down the path of letting people believe they could truly be whatever they wanted to be. Until then, if you were an outsider in your very localized social group, that was it. You had to conform, travel elsewhere, or be a pariah. Then AIM came along, and you could find other people like you without having to run away from home, or think there was something inherently wrong with you. If you looked hard enough, You could find a community, of course. That was also the point at which people started to realize they could use this newfound power for evil. Back us on the internet, nobody knows you are a dog. 85 The here. My kids are now old enough to begin exploring the web, and we have to teach them that you should never give your real info like ASL. You could actually be bored. There was a lot less fear of missing out and no posturing for social media. This hits hard. If someone was doing something nice, you could be a lot more confident that they were just nice and not just looking for upvotes somewhere. Was a teen in the 90s. It was glorious in my opinion. No social media. We passed paper notes, talked on the phone instead of texting, went out to the movies in the mall. A lot. The music obviously was the best. Life was simpler. You nailed it. Graduated high school in 97 and loved that time in history. We were a generation that only knew a quick successful Gulf War, a great economy, and the beginning of grunge music. Yes, I was gloriously oblivious to bad things until Columbine happened my junior year. It was just so scary and depressing, and I think it really impacted my mental health and view of the world. I did not live in correctional officer, but watched it happen on the continual news feed that day. Good news. School shootings are way down this year. When you make plans with your friends, you just decide on a time and place, and everyone usually shows up on time. Usually at the arcade, to play Mortal Kombat, the most violent game at the time. All foods were pizza flavored. For more adult foods they called it sundried tomato, but it was the same flavor. Things were also nacho flavored, frequently labeled as extreme, because extreme sports like rollerblading and BMX were really popular. This was also the time of the Disney Renaissance, so we had a lot of great movies coming out as kids. Will Smith was a constant presence with his music, movies, television. I had a wall poster of a dog wearing sunglasses and a bandana. Kids everywhere were playing street hockey and basketball. Towards the end of the decade there were a lot of futuristic vibes. The Matrix, Y2K fears, and just a general hope for the future. Also Frosted Eyeshadow became popular inexplicably. It was a magical time. I had that same poster, or a similar one, but my dog was riding in a top-down convertible, LOL. It took about 5 minutes to load up a computer fully, and about 10 minutes to find and print the Digimon World Digivolution FAQ. Also elementary school currency was Pokemon cards. I remember my mum complaining because she would turn on the computer, make a cup of tea, drink it, and be back in her chair before the computer was actually ready to use. No online stuff for school. We had to print everything, or handwrite. As computers became more common, we would submit floppy disks with our work on them. ML attachments were not really a thing for school either, because the inboxes were so limited. The most fun part of writing a paper for English class in Microsoft Word was choosing which font you would use. We would spend most of the time on the computer choosing a funky border or which word art for the title than actually writing anything. Life felt a lot more promising. I was hoping someone would sum up that decade this way. Life definitely felt more promising. Just felt like the world was less fearful as a whole too. I am probably looking back on it more fondly than it was. But the only scare that I remember was Y2K LOL, which I guess is actually the end of the 90s. HIV/AIDS was still a big deal. But even by the 90s, it was not the instant death sentence that it was in the 80s. I remember every single even vaguely young show would have a very special episode about an AIDS scare and tell everyone how important it was to wear a condom. Music was the same. I feel like kids were definitely told by pop culture to wrap it up a lot more. Also, to be blunt, a lot of people back then simply did not care about HIV. It was the gay disease. The 90s and into the early zeros had some incredible cartoons. Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and just so many more. And that's just what was on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. The other channels had a ton too. I just did not watch them as much. TV in general was much better back then. There was a boom in the satellite and cable services, all searching for shows to fill the airwaves, and networks were much more adventurous for it. I think we are in the golden age of serialized TV. But I would argue we are also in the golden age of crap that no one wants to watch. Things felt more stable. There were problems of course, but not the constant doom of today's current affairs. This might have been because news was not as accessible as it is now. Developing technologies like the internet and cell phones held promise of a future filled with innovation that would bring us together and improve our lives. They undoubtedly have improved many aspects of our lives, but they have also fundamentally changed the way we perceive ourselves and the world around us. It was kinda nice not to know everything. The world was smaller. Conversation was more important. It seems strange to believe something someone tells you these days. So many urban legends you kinda thought were true. I appreciate the instant access to knowledge, but with that came the necessity of weeding out misinformation. A whole lot of people never got that memo. I feel like the conversations are still important, but different. I have had some serious discussions with strangers on Reddit that never would have been possible in the 90s. A lot of its perspective. Is the world a big place to explore or a big monster to hide from? There were video game arcades in every mall. Kids made each other mixtapes in high school. The Simpsons was massive. Dan Cortez was a household name. Gas cost like $1.19 a gallon. People were getting into the internet, but still reading newspapers. Damn, where were you from? I got my license in 2000 and gas was $0.82 a gallon. My mom would give me a 20 on Sunday and it was for my week's school lunch to a day and to fill my car. And I always had enough to get a plent pack of bread and a 20-ounce Dr. Pepper from the change. One of my favorite aspects of the 90s was that the internet was an accessory to life. Now it is pretty much a necessity to life. Well said. It was much better as a tool than as an omniscient driving force. Was born in 90, so I have nostalgia glasses, but it was definitely a more optimistic time in America. Dating in the 90s was fun and weird. Lots of retro shiny clothing and the 70s vibe. Lots of crazy hairstyles for guys. Think Frosted Tips gals had a ton of clips, sparkle and chunky highlights. I went to clubs that featured 70s hits, but the band would randomly play Nirvana or Metallica. Grunge look was supreme and alt-rock hot. Food TV was gearing up and it still ran old school Iron Chef shows. Reality TV was in its prenatal stages. The East Coast West Coast rap war was happening. Rich men used to drive around in Zeppelins dropping coins on people. In those days, nickels had bees on them. Give me 5 bees for a quarter, you would say. Wearing an onion on your belt was the style at the time. On Thanksgiving, we would eat turkey, which in those days was called walking bird. Being spanked was still an acceptable form of punishment. Grover Cleveland spanked me on 2 non-consecutive occasions. I was in high school from 90 to 94. You could not Google shit for school. Most people did not even have a computer. You had to ride your bike to the library, or drive when I got a car in 92, and research. The encyclopedia and some other research books could not be checked out, so you would have to copy pages at 10 cents a page, or take good notes. If you did not know how to spell a word you had to go to the dictionary, have some basics of how it is spelled, and look it up. We did not worry about school shootings and we only had fire drills. Also, no zero tolerance policies. I started a minimum wage job for $4.25 an hour in 92. My first job. From 95 to 99 I was in my apprenticeship. Although I was king of the world starting at $13.00 an hour. My wife and I bought our first house for $100,000 in 98. We had rented a 2-master bedroom apartment for only $600 a month before that. My wife and I thought we had the world by the balls. Nice little house, 2 new cars, kickers union jobs, great health, insurance, making $100,000 a year in the late 90s. Everything seemed so cheap compared to wages in this town Las Vegas back then. Meanwhile people still struggle to get $13.00 an hour jobs 20 years later. Mostly baggy and low slung, and many hedgerows contained porn. 1990s it was being able to work as a security guard in Seattle and to be able to afford a shitty studio. 2021 you have to be a software engineer with 10 years of experience to rent that same shitty studio in Seattle. 1990s complaining about 10 correctional officer pay to see your PCP and 50 for a visit. 2021 complaining about 100 correctional officer pay to see your PCP and 1500 for a visit. 1990s complaining it costs $35,000 for a 4-year degree and only getting a $35,000 job out of college. 2021 complaining it costs $200,000 for a 4-year degree and only getting $35,000 job out of college. No wonder there so many serial killers in Seattle. Your friends walked to your house and knocked on your door and asked if you wanted to come out. No mobile phone, so no texting, social media bliss. And parents told them he can't go now. He has to study. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.